The first crack in my marriage didn't come with a suspicious text message or a late-night phone call. It came in the form of a scent, faint but unmistakable. A cologne that didn't belong to me. I noticed it on Emma's clothes one evening when she came home from work. She walked past me in the hallway, muttering something about being exhausted, and as she brushed by, I caught it. Not my cologne, not her perfume, something foreign, masculine, clinging to her like a ghost of another man's presence. I didn't say anything right away. Maybe it was from a coworker. Maybe it was nothing. But it was there, and my mind latched onto it like a dog with a bone. I wasn't the jealous type, never had been, but something about that scent set off an alarm in the back of my mind that wouldn't shut up. I told myself I was being stupid. It was a one-time thing, a coincidence. But then it happened again, and again. Over the next 2 weeks, I started noticing little details that didn't make sense. A faint smudge of lipstick on the inside of her wrist when she never reapplied it during the day. The way she started wearing nicer outfits to work, even on days when she had no meetings. The way she suddenly cared about how her hair looked when she got home, checking it in the mirror before she even kissed me hello. It was like watching someone slowly morph into a different person right in front of my eyes. The moment everything shifted for me was the night I caught her lying about where she had been. She had told me she was going to a late meeting with some clients, something about a new project her team was working on. But when I went to grab something from her car later that night, I found a valet stub on the passenger seat. A fancy restaurant downtown. Not exactly the kind of place where business meetings happened at 9 at night. The time on the stub was from earlier that evening, right around the time she had texted me saying she was stuck in the office. I stood there in the garage, staring at that little slip of paper my mind racing through every possible explanation. Maybe she had gone there for work. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was making a big deal out of something innocent. But then, a thought hit me like a punch to the gut. If the roles were reversed, if she had found that stub in my car, what would she think? What excuse would I have that she would actually believe? And the answer was obvious, none. She would assume I was cheating, and she wouldn't be wrong to think it. That was when the doubt turned into something heavier, something sharper. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit back and pretend everything was fine while my wife was out doing God knows what with God knows who. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I decided to follow her. The next evening, she told me she was working late again, and this time, I didn't just nod and accept it. I waited until she left, then grabbed my keys and followed her car at a distance, careful not to get too close. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, my palms slick against the steering wheel. It felt surreal, like I was acting out a scene from a bad movie. I didn't want to believe she was actually cheating, didn't want to believe I had become the kind of husband who had to tail his wife like some pathetic private investigator. But here I was, driving through the city, watching her taillights flicker in the distance, hoping, praying that I was wrong. She didn't go to her office. She didn't even go downtown. She drove to a part of the city we never had any reason to visit, pulling into the parking lot of a small, dimly lit bar tucked between a laundromat and a closed-down bookstore. Not the kind of place for business meetings. I parked across the street and waited, stomach twisting into knots as she stepped out of the car and walked inside. She wasn't alone. A man was waiting for her. I didn't get a good look at him at first, just a tall figure in a dark jacket standing near the entrance. But then he stepped forward, and I saw his face. Older than me, maybe by 5 or 6 years. Sharp features, confident smile. The kind of guy who looked like he had never had to work too hard to get what he wanted. He placed a hand on Emma's waist as she walked up to him, leaning in close to whisper something in her ear. And then she laughed. Not the polite, forced laugh she gave at work functions. Not the tired laugh she gave me when I tried to make a joke after a long day. This was different. Lighter. Flirtatious. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, a wave of nausea rolling through me. There it was. The confirmation. The thing I had been dreading but couldn't ignore. She was cheating on me. Right in front of me. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, watching through the windshield as they ordered drinks, as she leaned in closer, as their hands brushed against each other with an ease that made it clear this wasn't the first time. My mind was screaming at me to do something, to get out of the car, to march inside and call her out right there in front of everyone. But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Instead, I just sat there, letting it all sink in, letting the weight of her betrayal settle into my bones. And then, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I wasn't just devastated. I was angry. I had spent years building a life with this woman, giving her everything I had, trusting her completely. And this was how she repaid me? With stolen moments in a shitty bar with some other guy? No, I wasn't going to let this slide. I took a deep breath, forcing the anger down, letting it settle into something colder, something sharper. I needed a plan. I wasn't going to storm in there and make a scene. That was what she would expect, what she would be ready for. No, I needed to be smart about this. So, I pulled out my phone and took a picture. One shot, clear as day, Emma and her mystery man, sitting close together, lost in their own little world. Evidence. Proof. The first step in what was about to be a very calculated response. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to make her regret every single lie she had ever told me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with my phone in my hand, staring at the picture I had taken, my mind running in circles, trying to process everything. I kept asking myself the same questions over and over. How long had this been going on? Who was he? Was this the first time, or had she been sneaking around for months? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I wasn't just hurt. I was humiliated. She had looked me in the eye, kissed me goodbye, told me she was working late while she was out drinking with him, touching him, laughing like she didn't have a husband waiting at home. I wanted to wake her up and shove my phone in her face, force her to admit it, watch her scramble for an excuse. But I wasn't going to give her that chance. Not yet. When Emma finally came home, it was late, past midnight. I heard her heels clicking against the floor as she walked in, her movements careful, like she didn't want to wake me. She didn't know I had been sitting in the dark, watching the door, waiting. When she turned the corner and saw me, she froze. "Jesus, you scared me," she said, letting out a nervous laugh as she placed her purse on the table. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" I kept my voice steady. "Couldn't sleep." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded, slipping off her coat. "Long day. I'm exhausted." I watched her, looking for any sign of guilt, anything that would betray her. She didn't look ashamed. She didn't look nervous. She looked normal, like she had just come home from another regular night, like she hadn't been touching another man just hours ago. The casual way she moved around the room made my stomach turn. I needed to test her. "So, how was work?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Emma let out a sigh, rubbing the back of her neck. "Exhausting." The client kept going back and forth, and we ended up staying later than expected. "I swear, I need a vacation." She was lying right to my face. No hesitation, no stuttering, just a smooth, well-practiced lie. I nodded slowly, gripping my phone tighter. "Did you eat?" I asked. "Grabbed something small at the office," she replied without missing a beat, walking past me toward the stairs. "I'm going to shower and head to bed. You should try to sleep too." And just like that, she was gone. I sat there for a long time, listening to the sound of the water running upstairs, letting the weight of her lies settle in. She hadn't even flinched. She had stood there, looking me right in the eye, and lied as easily as breathing. I thought maybe I'd feel something else, sadness, grief, anything other than this hollow rage. But there was nothing. Just a cold certainty. The woman I married didn't exist anymore. The next day, I decided to dig deeper. If she was willing to lie to my face without hesitation, then I had no idea what else she had been hiding. I didn't just want to know if she was cheating. I wanted to know everything. So, while she was in the shower, I took her purse and checked her wallet. No receipts. Nothing that would tell me where she had been. She was careful. I put everything back exactly how I found it, then went to our bedroom and watched as she got ready for bed, acting like nothing had happened. She kissed me goodnight, curled up beside me, and within minutes, she was asleep. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long she had been doing this. How many times had she come home, gotten into bed with me after being with him? The thought made my skin crawl. Over the next few days, I started watching her more closely. I paid attention to every detail, the way she touched her phone constantly but never left it unattended, the way she left the room when she got certain calls, the way she smiled at her messages but never shared what was so funny. She was slipping away, and I had been too blind to see it until now. Then, another crack appeared. Emma told me she had another late meeting. She kissed me goodbye, grabbed her purse, and walked out the door like she had nothing to hide. I waited for a few minutes, then followed. She didn't go to the office. She didn't even go anywhere near it. She drove straight to the same bar, the same one where I had seen her with him. This time, I parked closer, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. She got out of the car, smoothed her dress, and walked inside. A few minutes later, he arrived. They didn't even try to hide it. He walked right up to her, placed a hand on the small of her back, and leaned in close. She laughed, tilting her head slightly, giving him access to whisper something in her ear. I felt something snap inside me. I grabbed my phone and took another picture. This wasn't some one-time mistake. This wasn't some emotional lapse that she was going to regret and confess to. This was deliberate. This was planned. I wanted to go in there. I wanted to walk up to their table and drag her out of that bar, throw the pictures on the table, and watch her face crumble as she realized she had been caught. But that wasn't enough. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to make her regret every single moment of this affair. I took a deep breath, calming the storm inside me, then drove home. I had work to do. I spent the next 24 hours thinking about how I was going to do this. I wasn't just going to ask her outright because I knew exactly what would happen: denial, excuses, manipulation. She would twist it around, maybe even turn it on me, say I was being paranoid, insecure, controlling. No, I needed her to walk herself into a corner with nowhere to run. I needed her to feel the weight of every single lie she had told me. I had the pictures. I had the valet stub. I had the lies she told me straight to my face. That was more than enough. Now I just needed to push her until she broke. The opportunity came faster than I expected. Emma walked into the house that evening, carrying a takeout bag, humming like she hadn't just spent the last 2 hours with another man. She smiled at me, the same fake, practiced smile she had been giving me for weeks, as if nothing in our lives had changed. I brought dinner, she said, holding up the bag. Thought we could eat together. I nodded, forcing myself to stay calm. Sounds good. Let's talk while we eat. She hesitated for a split second before nodding. Sure. About what? I sat down at the table, watching as she unpacked the food, moving around the kitchen like she had no idea the walls were closing in. I let the silence stretch between us, waiting, letting her feel the weight of my gaze. She was too comfortable, too confident. She thought she was in control of this, and that pissed me off more than anything. You said you had a meeting last night, I said, keeping my tone casual. How did that go? She glanced at me, then back at her plate, tearing open a packet of soy sauce. It was fine. Long. The client is being difficult. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. And you had to stay at the office the whole time? She looked up at me then, her brow furrowing slightly. Yeah, of course. Why? I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table. The picture was right there on the screen, her standing at the bar, leaning into him, his hand resting comfortably against her waist. She didn't reach for the phone. She just stared at it, her face frozen, her expression unreadable. You weren't at the office, I said, my voice calm. You were here? Emma inhaled slowly, exhaled through her nose. Still, she didn't touch the phone. Where did you get that? That's not the question you should be asking, I said. The question you should be asking is how many more I have. She swallowed hard, her fingers curling into fists on the table. It's not what it looks like. I laughed, shaking my head. Don't insult me. Just tell me the truth. She finally reached for the phone, flipping it face down, as if that would somehow erase what I had seen. She looked at me then, and I saw the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out what angle to play. I was just having drinks with a friend, she said carefully. That's all. A friend who touches you like that? A friend you lie to me about? A friend you meet in secret after telling me you're working late? Her jaw tightened. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd react like this. I knew you'd make it into something it isn't. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. You don't get to stand there and pretend like I'm the crazy one. I know what's going on. I know you've been lying. I know you've been sneaking around behind my back, coming home to me after being with him. So stop playing dumb and tell me the truth. Emma clenched her teeth, her breathing coming a little faster now. It's not. Say it, I interrupted. Say the words out loud. She glared at me, her face flushed with anger, or maybe guilt, or maybe just frustration that she had finally been caught. It wasn't serious, she snapped. It was just something that happened. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Not trying to hurt me? You've been sneaking around with this guy for how long, Emma? Weeks? Months? And what? I was never supposed to find out. She pushed her plate away, crossing her arms over her chest like a petulant child. I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to be honest for once in your life, I said. I want you to look me in the eye and tell me why. Why him? Why now? Was I not enough? Were you bored? Emma scoffed, shaking her head. It's not that simple. Then make it simple. I shot back. Tell me the truth. She exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through her hair. I don't know, okay? It just happened. I didn't plan it. I wasn't looking for it. It just... You don't accidentally fall onto another man, I said coldly. You don't accidentally lie to your husband over and over. You don't accidentally destroy a marriage. Emma's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes dark with something I couldn't quite place. I didn't destroy anything, she said quietly. I laughed again, the sound sharp and humorless. No? Then what do you call this? She was silent. I stood up, grabbing my phone and shoving it back into my pocket. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything, every single detail, every lie, every time you chose him over me. And depending on how much of the truth you give me, I'll decide how this ends. Her eyes flickered with something. Fear, maybe, or defiance. And if I don't? I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then you'll find out exactly what I'm capable of. She didn't say anything. She just stared at me, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw it. The realization that she wasn't the one in control anymore. I didn't say a word to her for the rest of the night. She tried a few times, hovering in the kitchen, pacing the living room, glancing at me like she was waiting for me to say something, to yell, to explode. But I didn't give her that. I wasn't going to give her an emotional out, some big dramatic fight where she could cry and pretend this was just some misunderstanding. No, she had made her choices, and now it was my turn. I stayed calm, cold, collected. And that, more than anything, seemed to rattle her. The next morning, I was already up before she came downstairs. She looked hesitant, maybe even nervous, but she tried to act normal. Do you want coffee? She asked, her voice careful, testing the waters. I didn't even look up from my phone. No. She lingered by the counter, fingers tapping against her mug. Steve, don't. I interrupted, finally glancing up at her. You said what you had to say last night. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. Her expression flickered, a mix of uncertainty and frustration. What does that mean? You'll see, I said simply. I took my time over the next few days, setting everything into motion. I wasn't going to be one of those guys who just rolled over and let his cheating wife walk away unscathed. She had disrespected me, humiliated me, lied to my face over and over. And I wasn't just going to let that slide. She wanted to sneak around behind my back? Fine. I was about to take everything from her. First, I made sure I had everything I needed. I went through our accounts, took screenshots of every financial record, every shared asset, every transaction. She had been careless, never really paying attention to how our money was handled, trusting me to manage it all. That was her first mistake. I had already moved half of our joint savings into my personal account before she even realized I knew about the affair. The house. In my name. The car she drove? Leased under me. She had nothing. Next, I sent the pictures to her boss. It wasn't hard to figure out who the guy was. Mark Thompson, some senior director at her company, married with 2 kids. A real respectable family man. I composed a polite but direct email, attaching the photos of them at the bar, the ones where he had his hands all over her, and sent it straight to his wife. Then, just for good measure, I copied their HR department. The fallout was immediate. By the next afternoon, Emma came storming into the house, her face red with rage. What the did you do? She shouted, slamming the door behind her. I leaned back in my chair, watching her without a hint of concern. Something wrong. You sent those pictures to Mark's wife? She snapped, her hands shaking. To his job? I nodded. Yeah. And? She let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through her hair. You ruined his life, Steve. His wife kicked him out. He's probably going to lose his job. I tilted my head, pretending to think about it. Good. Sounds like the consequences of being a lying. Her breathing was unsteady, her hands gripping the back of the couch like she needed something to hold onto. Do you have any idea what you've done? Oh, I know exactly what I've done, I said calmly. I made sure he got exactly what he deserved. Just like you're about to. Her eyes narrowed. What does that mean? I smiled, standing up slowly. It means you should probably start looking for a new place to live. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Steve, you thought you were going to get away with this? I continued, stepping closer. That you were just going to lie to my face, cheat on me, and still come home to a nice, comfortable life? No. You lost that privilege the second you decided I wasn't enough for you. She shook her head, her voice quieter now, almost desperate. We can talk about this. No, we can't, I cut her off. You already talked. You talked with him, in secret, behind my back, while I was here thinking we still had something real. You had your chance, Emma. Now I'm done. She stood there, stunned, like she hadn't expected me to actually do anything. Maybe she thought I'd just yell, cry, beg for an explanation. Maybe she thought she could gaslight her way out of it, make me question myself. But she was wrong. I had spent days planning this, making sure she had nothing left to cling to. I had closed our joint credit card, changed the passwords on every account she had access to, and taken back everything that was mine. "You can't just kick me out," she finally said, her voice shaky. I crossed my arms, looking down at her like she was a stranger. "I can, and I am. You have until the weekend." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. She had made her choices. Now she was going to live with them. Emma didn't leave right away. She spent the next 2 days walking around the house like a ghost, quiet and uncertain, like she was waiting for me to change my mind. I ignored her. She tried to talk to me a few times, but I shut it down every single time. I had nothing left to say to her. She had made her choices, and now she was dealing with the consequences. There was no sympathy left in me, no patience, no desire to hear whatever weak excuses she was still clinging to. I wanted her gone, out of my house, out of my life, out of everything I had built. The night before she was supposed to leave, she finally cornered me in the kitchen. I had just finished eating, rinsing my plate in the sink when she stepped in, closing the door behind her like she wanted privacy. I didn't look at her. I had no interest in whatever last-minute plea she was about to make. But she wasn't going to let me walk away this time. "Steve, we need to talk," she said, her voice quieter than usual, like she was trying to sound calm, reasonable. I dried my hands on a towel, then leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. "Talk about what?" She swallowed hard, her hands gripping the edge of the counter like she needed something to steady herself. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, and I know you're angry, Al." I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. "Angry? You think that's what this is?" She flinched slightly but pushed forward. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I wasn't looking for it, Steve. It just—" "Don't finish that sentence," I interrupted, my voice cold. "You didn't trip and fall into another man's arms, Emma. You didn't accidentally lie to me, sneak around, make plans behind my back. You made a choice. Over and over again. So don't stand here and act like you had no control over it." She exhaled sharply, looking down at the floor. "I wasn't happy. And that's my fault?" "No, She hesitated, then looked up at me, her eyes glassy. "I don't know when things started feeling different between us. I don't know when I stopped feeling connected to you. It wasn't about him, Steve. It wasn't about finding someone better. It was about feeling something again." I stared at her, barely able to process the selfishness of what she was saying. "Feeling something? So you decided to destroy our marriage because you were bored? Because you wanted some excitement?" She shook her head quickly. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that," I snapped. "You were too much of a coward to talk to me, to tell me you were unhappy, so instead, you ran off to some other guy. And now you want me to what? Understand? Forgive you?" She blinked rapidly, trying to keep herself composed. "I just don't want you to hate me." I laughed again, pushing off the counter and shaking my head. "Emma, I don't hate you. You're not even worth that much energy to me anymore. I just don't care." Her breath caught slightly, like that hurt more than if I had screamed at her. "So that's it," she whispered. "You're just done? You're throwing away everything we've built together?" I turned to face her fully, looking her dead in the eye. "You threw it away, Emma. You made that decision the second you decided I wasn't enough for you. So yeah, I'm done. I don't owe you anything anymore." Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, but I didn't feel anything watching them fall. There was a time when seeing her cry would have gutted me, when I would have done anything to fix what was broken between us. But that time had passed. She wiped at her face, taking a shaky breath. "Where am I supposed to go?" "Not my problem," I said flatly. She stared at me for a long moment, maybe hoping I'd cave, that some part of me would soften and give her a way out of the mess she had created. But I didn't. I just stood there, waiting for her to realize that I meant every word. Eventually, she nodded, defeated. "Okay," she murmured. "I'll leave in the morning." I didn't respond. I just walked past her and out of the kitchen, leaving her alone with the wreckage of what she had done. Emma was gone by the time I woke up. No goodbye. No last attempt at an apology. Nothing. Just an empty closet, a half-made bed, and silence. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, staring at the space where her things used to be, feeling nothing. No sadness, no relief, just an absence. I walked downstairs, expecting to feel some shift in the air, some moment of realization that my marriage was officially over, but all I felt was hunger. So, I made breakfast, sat at the table alone, and ate in peace. By noon, I was back to business. I had already filed for divorce and made sure every financial and legal move was in place before she had a chance to do anything. I wasn't going to give her a single opportunity to drag this out. The evidence of her affair was more than enough to make sure I walked away with everything. She had nothing to fight for. I had already won before she even realized. I spent the afternoon closing out any remaining loose ends, ensuring that her access to my life had been completely severed. Every shared account, every credit card, every key to this house, gone. The only thing left was the paperwork. A few days later, she called me. I had been expecting it, but I let it ring 3 times before answering, just to make her wait. I signed the papers, she said, skipping any greeting, her voice tired, hollow. Good, I replied. There was a pause, long enough that I almost hung up, but then she spoke again, quieter this time. Was any of it real for you? I let out a slow breath, gripping my phone a little tighter. At one point, yeah, but not anymore. Another silence, then a shaky exhale. I never wanted to lose you. You didn't lose me, I said. You threw me away. I could hear her trying to hold back tears, but I didn't care. She had her chances to cry for this marriage when it actually mattered. Now it was too late. Are you ever going to forgive me? She asked, her voice small. I thought about it for a moment, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to make sure she felt every second of my silence. No, I finally said. She let out a choked breath, then cleared her throat quickly. I guess I deserve that. Yeah, I said simply. You do. She didn't say anything else. She just sighed, whispered a goodbye, and hung up. I stared at my phone for a second before putting it down, then went back to my day like nothing had happened. Weeks passed, and people started finding out. Friends reached out, some to check on me, others to fish for details. I told them what they needed to know, nothing more. Some people tried to defend her, saying she must have been going through something, that maybe we could work things out, that love was complicated. I shut that down fast. Love wasn't complicated. She just didn't love me enough to be faithful. End of story. The last time I saw her was at a mutual friend's party a few months later. She wasn't expecting me to be there, and when she saw me, she froze. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I walked past her like she was nothing, like she was just another stranger in the room. She looked like she wanted to say something, like she was waiting for some kind of closure, but she never got it. She never would. That was the last time I ever thought about her as someone who had any relevance in my life. She became just another lesson, another story, another reminder of what betrayal looked like. And as I walked out of that party, feeling nothing but the crisp night air around me, I realized something. I had won.